Welcome. We're excited to bring you a new mini-series called Literacy Now Together, a special collaboration between FULCRUM and Parents for Reading Justice.
So welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you could join us today. We have been looking forward to this episode for quite some time. This is one that's it's unique. We have guests from both coasts. We have guests from Berkeley, California, and we have guests from the great state of Tennessee. So, we think it's going to be interesting because there are some parallels of things that have happened recently in both locations that are applicable to a variety of contexts around the country. So we want to make sure that we bring folks who are knowledgeable about these things to you, and we look forward to today's conversation. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, I just want to welcome Lindsay Nofelt and Niki Richardson.
Hey, Kareem. Hey, Brett.
Yeah. Welcome.
And so you both have experienced watershed court cases, and in your own work, in your communities, you have advocated for students and for children with dyslexia. Before we get into the details, the nuts and bolts, why are these cases important for parents, students, school district teachers, et cetera? Why are these cases important for them to know about? And then we can get into some of the details about what actually happened.
So from my perspective, these kinds of court cases are really important because they set precedent on the responsibility of school districts to teach our children to read with success. There's always a sense that, whose job is it to make sure that children read early and successfully? And if you go to a public school, the fingers point everywhere, but they often don't point at their own system. So these court cases pretty definitively say, you know what, actually, the educational system has a responsibility to teach children how to read. There's no getting around it.
Thank you. Niki, what about you? How would you kind of synthesize why the cases are important, especially the one in Tennessee?
Sure. I'm sure we'll get into it, but California legislation around literacy looks a little different than Tennessee's, right?
Yes.
So speaking for Tennessee, and for everyone, it really just holds people accountable, right? It's all about accountability. And in Tennessee, I think it's that accountability plus that fidelity piece. We have some legislation in place around literacy that should be catching things like this, right? And preventing this from happening. But we have to, I think it's going to, shine a brighter light on the accountability of school districts, of state departments of education, of colleges of education who should be producing educators who are prepared for what our students bring in. For educators, it holds that accountability and that fidelity, right? Where don't just check the box and say, yeah, we did it. We need to see that it's the checks and balances are there and who's checking up on that. Okay. I think that's what we're going to see there.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Let's start with you, Niki. What was this? Can you synthesize the gist of this case that happened out there in Tennessee and how was it adjudicated?
Sure. So, in Tennessee, we have a case, William versus Montgomery County, Clarksville schools. And what happened is, despite William's, academic achievements, which he graduated with a 3.4 GPA, he had an individualized education plan, an IEP. And it focused on reading fluency. It focused on accommodations like text-to-speech software and other AI tools. But that actually ended up masking his inability to read. And rather than, addressing those foundational reading skills that were just so necessary for him learning to read. So he actually ended up graduating without being able to read. In the Sixth Circuit court stated that William graduated high school without being able to read or even spell his name. So just a heartbreaking situation there. Anyways, this court case, went to the administrative law judge, and they found that the school did fail to provide William with free, appropriate public education, which is mandated by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. The administrative law judge, he said that the school district was ordered to provide 888 hours of compensatory dyslexia tutoring or therapy to the student, William. That went on to be something that I think is such a groundbreaking case for our state, and I think for the country, for them to say, yes, actually, you must provide this. This is, this is a disservice that this student and an injustice that this student went through. That I think this ruling just sets a precedent that schools must ensure that IEPs are, really tailored. They're diagnostic to that student specific educational need, because that's a disability that they have, right? The IEP is in place because there is a disability in place or that student has. So we have to focus on skill development and appropriate goal setting rather than just here's some accommodations that's going to skirt you by. Right. And those are good. They have a place. Accommodations and AI and technology, they have a place. They certainly do, but it can't take the place of the ability to read and write.
So the young person is getting accommodations. They're receiving the text to speech and all these different things to support them so they can do their homework, so they can turn in assignments or whatever it is, but they're not actually learning how to read. Then I guess the issue is about what is appropriate. We want kids to graduate from high school. Yes. We love good grades. Yes. But this seems to suggest that being appropriate means it's more than just the school context. You have to be preparing young people for how to navigate life. I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to read too much in between it, but it seems to suggest there's appropriate in school is more than just you can turn in your assignment,
Well, and how on earth could a child graduate and not be able to spell his name? I mean, that is, I can't even wrap my head around that. Clearly.
That's common. So accommodations can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Sometimes accommodations in the past have meant we just have to get you through this. How can we get it so that you don't feel bad, look bad, and get bad grades? It's not just I'm going to give you more time to take a test. It is we're going to use this technology to kind of take the test for you. But that's not always helping kids learn.
Oh, no.
And you might not find that out like this student until the kid is almost graduated. Am I accurate with this? Is this right? I don't want to say something that's out of turn.
No, Kareem, you're right. And the heartbreaking thing to me is, what about those students that this did happen to and no one raised a flag on?
This is not the first time. That's right. That's right.
But yeah, you are correct. I mean, I think it gets muddy. Accommodations versus a modification, right? Are we modifying it? Or are we accommodating so the student, and accommodations are great and mostly a necessity for a lot of students, especially when we get into those high school grades, because, when we're at high school level, that content's tough, right? So do we accommodate to allow access to the content? 100%. Yeah. But do we make so many accommodations where the student never makes skill gains?
Right.
Because in the long run, we want them to eventually be able to access this with the least amount of accommodations, right? The least restrictive environment. So yeah, you're right on the money with that.
So I eventually pulled my daughter out of public school. We put her in a private school, and she still struggled. And when we finally had her tested, we had a neuropsych evaluation done, very expensive. We got it done, and we had this thick packet, and we went to this. We had a list of accommodations and all this stuff. And I went and spoke with the counselor and the principal and all these people, and I will never forget. As I was advocating, and I was in my bag, real tough. I was saying, we got to have this, and we got to have that, and she needs this, and they looked at me, and the counselor said, "We accommodate, but we don't modify." And I think and I was taken aback. I was like, oh, that's a thing. Meaning the standard is the standard. Mm-hmm. You've got to get here, but we're going to have some allowances and supports to enable you to get there. That's different than saying you don't have to achieve. you don't have to reach the standard because of your learning difference.
They want to try to maintain that high standard, and they will allow you some accommodations to access it.
I do think there could be some more knowledge that needs to be built around what that should look like. Individualized education plans are individualized 100%, right? They're going to be tailored to that student. But I think we have some learning to do across the board on where does the accommodation end and the skill building begin? Like, what's the balance that student needs? Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm wondering, why wouldn't the school district, why did that even go to court? Once they found out what was being brought, why wouldn't they say, their counsel say, look, we got to settle this thing. We're sorry, we blew it. This kid graduated, they can't even write. Okay, clearly we messed up. But their willingness to contest this or engage, that says a lot about the mindset of school systems.
Ignorance.
Not just ignorant, they will fight tooth and nail.
Absolutely, and spend a lot of money. And it unfortunately, oftentimes is a calculation of money. How much will this case cost versus how much will it take to remedy the actual problem, which is terrible.
Yeah.
But do you think that the reason that they fought tooth and nail is because the precedence is so important?
Oh.
Like, if they were held responsible for every high schooler to graduate being an adequate reader, then the burden on the school systems in general will be, quote unquote, too high.
Fascinating.
But what that means that they believe is that they cannot teach every child to learn to read, and that it is not their fault that kid can't learn to read. So they are buying into the idea that the kid is coming with too much trauma or the parents didn't read to them enough. They are still shaming and blaming the child, rather than what a lot of the research is saying is that if you get really good instruction from day one and you find the kids who might struggle and you help them, basically almost every kid, 95% of kids, can learn to read. They still think it's not their problem.
It's not our responsibility. It's not our fault.
Nope.
It's not our fault. You can't blame us. We're doing the best we can. And the real question is, what do you expect of us? Well, it seems like the courts have weighed in. We expect you, school system, to provide not just free, but an appropriate education. I think that's the answer to the question. What do you expect of us? What do you want us to do? This kid they've got issues or whatever, and the courts, and it's a shame that the courts have to be the ones to weigh in, but thank God that they have.
And that has to happen time and time again. But by doing this, you're helping all of these kids behind. And I just wonder myself, how many other parents and parent groups, because that's my interest, is these are all weapons that we can leverage all across the country.
Niki, what has the reception been as a result of this case? I mean, is it just kind of quietly going into the night? What has been the response to this?
Yeah, I'm not one. I can't speak for that school district. For one, but I can say that it definitely has been something that stayed relevant for several months among our dyslexic community of supporters, right? Our awareness community, whether that's parents, educators, other therapists like myself, we and other advocates, we know about it. We're using it as leverage. And I think that's who obviously is going to cling on to it. I sure hope that school districts are seeing this and going, hey, especially at the secondary level, hey, we need to take this and think about where are we having some missteps that look similar to this? What can we do so that we don't end up in this situation, and not because of the legal process, but because of it's all for good of the kid, right?
Ethical,
right. And I do want to go back to, for one point on, I wonder, this family went and sought dyslexia therapy services outside of school before he graduated. And I wonder if that is another layer to why the court decided on that ruling and said, you know what, actually, you're not providing free and appropriate, because when this student went to the outside therapy, he started making gains with his literacy. He was, it was skill-based foundational reading support, and he began to learn to read. And I think that was your clear sign of, so, that's that's a hard thing to deal with, right?
Yeah.
That's wonderful that this all ended up in that situation for this student, but not every student has the means to go out and get that therapy, right? So I do want to add that in. I should have brought that up when I first discussed the case, but I do want to add that those parents did seek outside support. And then the judge did rule that, hey, this outside support worked and you need more of it.
Right.
So, and the school should have been giving it to you.
That's right, all along. Lindsay, I'm curious, does this sound familiar to you? Does this ring a bell to what's going on in Berkeley? And could you tell us a little bit about the case in Berkeley, California as well? But does this sound familiar to you at all?
For sure. There's threads across both of these cases that are useful for people nationwide. In Berkeley, I was not a part of this original federal class action lawsuit. Mm-hmm. My child, actually, my oldest, went to kindergarten the year after this was brought up in federal court. He is now in middle school.
Oh, wow.
What is it? 8 years later, we are starting to see some change in Berkeley because of this settlement. In 2017, 4 families brought together a federal class action lawsuit that claimed that Berkeley Unified did not teach children to read effectively. They had been using Lucy Calkins since at least 2010. And if a kid struggled, they did not identify nor have effective support to help them. And so in 2020, the school district settled this class action lawsuit, and they put together with the plaintiffs a list of more than 30 actions that they would have to take over a 3-year time period in order to show that they were improving the way they did that first teach, the tier 1 general classroom setting, as well as identification and effective support for those who struggled. So my child has dyslexia, and we had trouble getting him identified. And like you, Kareem, had to seek out a private neuropsych assessment in order to get the support that we needed, both through private help and through the school system. We were lucky enough to catch it pretty early, and he is a successful reader. He shows that with the correct support early enough, the need for expensive modifications or specialized academic instruction can be truly minimized. He's regarded as needing low supports now. In Berkeley, we ended up basically putting in place a few years early what's coming down the legislature pike now. For example, next year in California, all students K through 2 need to be screened for reading difficulty. Wow. And they need to choose one of 4 screener devices. And in 2020, the district adopted DIBELS through Amplify and started screening kids K through 2 3 times a year. And immediately, when that data was shared with families, we saw a marked improvement in the amount of kids who were able to read early and successfully. And that's 5 years ahead of where the California legislature is. And I suspect that we will continue to be ahead because we have implemented some of these things, especially at the elementary school level. But it doesn't address what Niki was talking about with the kids that we left behind. I talked a little bit about how long it's taken to kind of address some of these systemic issues. We knew a long time ago, 25 years ago, that there were problems with the methodology in balanced literacy. But even this year, our school district's official curriculum is Teachers College Writing and Reading Project to CRWP Lucy Calkins. It will be 25 years from when we should have or could have known that there were better ways to teach kids how to read successfully. And every year from Berkeley High, we have data that suggests that 200 kids from Berkeley High are graduating without being able to read fluently, and they walk out with diplomas, but are they truly prepared?
Well, that's the thing.
So
That's a theme. That's kind of what Niki was
it's
saying.
heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's kind of what Niki was saying. In this situation, it was related to the goals and the IEP process. But you're talking about just general ed. In general ed, what is appropriate? What is it? What is acceptable in terms of reading proficiency? What do we consider the bar to be? And the states usually set that. The states set, this is the threshold, and all across the country, people are wrestling with this. They trust that if the school says you're doing well, then you must be doing well. If you're bringing home A's and B's, or even a C, it means that there's no alarm bells going off. Things are all right. Whether you're in general ed or you're in general ed plus special ed or whatever supports you may have, if the grades are good, I'm not getting phone calls. I'm not getting notices to come to some meeting or something. Like, things are okay. And the kid is eligible to play sports and all these other things. The alarm bells usually just don't go off. But your situations, or the situations in the school districts in your communities, even though the alarm bells weren't going off, what the courts are saying is there's still a problem because the A in FAPE isn't being met. What comes to mind, Brett? I'm curious when you hear that.
The Hechinger report did a really interesting article about how there is a disconnect between what parents are seeing in report cards and what they assume is happening and what the actual performance of their children is. There is that disconnect. So the question to me is it a matter of the districts just pushing kids along because they don't expect them to do any better? Or are they hiding something? Like what's going on? How are they pushing these kids through with B's and C's, as you say, not raising
or
the alarm
even
bell?
A's, 3.4 GPA.
Yeah, but I mean, what is the game that's going on?
I feel like sometimes, especially with veteran teachers who've been through cycles of education improvement and different curriculums and this and that, there is a hearts and minds issue where eventually people just expect a certain percentage of kids not to succeed. They expect them to fail. And their job then becomes more like emotional support and keeping them safe and content in school, rather than seeing if we could put together a system, MTSS process or whatever that would actually see these kids progress. Mm-hmm. And in Berkeley, it tended to be about 40% that they would expect to fail. If they were getting 60% of their kids at around grade level, then there was no pressure anywhere to do any better than that.
Well, and if you think about the teachers who are not learning, they're learning balanced literacy in school. So they're not really learning how to teach kids to read. They're doing everything they can. And so it makes sense that it's the parent's fault or the child's fault. And so really it creates this untenable situation with teachers working as hard as they can, having paid for college, having spent all this time, and they don't know how to teach reading. And these kids aren't learning to read. So they're just trying to get through too.
It makes me think of like a tool. Their toolkit isn't quite deep enough. When all they know is the balanced literacy approach, they don't know how to go deeper. They know something's not right? Mm-hmm. You can't tell me that they don't know something's not right with these students who can't read and write at such, at a certain point, right? They know something's not right. They know they're relying too much on assistive technology. They know they're giving them too many accommodations. They know that, this can't be it. There's something a little different than these other students who maybe are high flying, right? But they don't know, they don't have the tools. Their tool bag's empty. So I think that's where the science of reading comes in. I think that's where structured literacy, I think that's where the knowledge building we have to look to that.
And I think it brings us right back to the legislature. It seems to me that these lawsuits and settlements are coming to patch up systems that don't yet exist through law. And you can see it in Tennessee, where their state law and their systems are proving that with adequate support and research and evidence-based practices set at the top level and trickling down is really an effective practice. And California is behind in that. So we're having lawsuits that go to the core of elementary school foundational education that are hitting that. And in Tennessee, you're seeing lawsuits about the end of the pipeline, at the end of the process, because they really have legislated some good structures in the beginning. And I find it fascinating to think about how we could look in the future in 10 years and we'll probably see more lawsuits like what Tennessee is experiencing right now in California. So here we are at the expectations, like how much do we expect school districts to have and build their own expertise? And is it okay that everybody has such varied levels of knowledge and understanding about what is evidence-based practices and how to actually get kids to accelerate their learning in order to catch up sooner? When are we going to be not okay with every district charting their own path and being expected to have that deep understanding that took years and years for experts to gain?
I think the origin, the root of it is the College of Education. And until the colleges of education are following and are up to date with the science, then you're just going to keep dropping teachers in that don't know how to teach kids how to read. And districts who parents or whoever can flip to the science of reading still have to pay out of pocket to retrain teachers to learn how to teach reading. Then you have to go back into the system once you get K-3 kind of set up and have all the kids in the system, like the gentleman in Tennessee who we've missed, and make up for that. But until you get the colleges of education, it's just an extra expense and for the districts and more harm to the children.
I have a question for the two of you. Berkeley, California, and then the state of Tennessee couldn't be more different. I mean, people are people. But politically speaking, you know, we out here, we call the People's Republic of Berkeley. They walk their own to their own drum. And then Tennessee, I think last time they voted for a Democratic president was Clinton. And, you know, Clinton was from Arkansas, so he was SEC country. So very different place politically. But you're wrestling with some of the same issues around getting children to read, especially children with learning differences like dyslexia. So opposite coasts, opposite political contexts, same issue. Is there anything that you take from that? What does that tell you?
You know, I think, obviously dyslexia is in my heart, right? As a dyslexia therapist and advocate, I'm very biased and say it's a nonpartisan issue. There is no political gain in this. This is, regardless of political affiliation and socioeconomic status, your race, the geography where you live, right, in this country. Dyslexia and its consequences have a direct, and just illiteracy in general, have a direct impact on, our education, our employment, our economic, opportunity. So, those are all issues that matter to everyone, no matter what your political, viewpoint is. And, reading and is just not a political issue. It's a human issue. It's a civil right. I think, Kareem, I think I've heard you say that, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
And, it's a human issue. It's not a political issue. So we have to keep thinking of it in that way. This is for the betterment of our communities. It is not just, it is just for each individual student. Don't get me wrong, but it embedders the entire, it makes everything better in your communities, which of course is going to trickle into everything. It crosses over liberal, conservative ideology. It doesn't matter. This is an everybody issue. And so I think it's interesting when you start to look at legislators who promote literacy legislation. I do find that don't test me on this. I haven't gone through every state, but you do find a lot of crossover. You do find a lot of bipartisan, relationships being formed over literacy, because I do think at the heart, everyone does agree that this is such a crucial issue. My concern is why does it fall? Why does it fall off? What happens there, right?
Yeah. Lindsay, you have any thoughts on that?
The simple answer might be that we have some very stubborn parents all over the world, because bringing these cases against districts
Thank God we
is
do.
not
need
for the
that.
faint
God we
of
do,
heart.
yeah.
But I also think that the deeper kind of understanding and the commonality might be that we believe and we hope that the promise of a free public education as a leg up for everybody is like a core belief of our nation. I know that there's problems with it, obviously, but that hope that we can fulfill the promise of education for all keeps us on the same page.
I know that Berkeley educators, they don't go into it for the money. So they
Correct.
clearly want to help children. Why do they cling so hard to what is not working?
This is such a hard question.
But it's the
But it's
heart
the
of
question.
It.
It is the question.
It is the question. Yeah. So, I mean, like every time we circle around this issue, the hearts and minds and the culture of a place, you wonder why something's happening or why hearts and minds aren't being changed easily when faced with the evidence of data and decades of research. And there's multiple reasons, of course. There's multiple causations. Part of it is like the grief cycle, right? Not wanting to face the years and years that you didn't know and you didn't do the best for kids. But also in Berkeley in particular, we have long-term skilled educators. We have lots of smart people who only want the best for kids. And we have this kind of liberal mindset that we have to be the leaders to buck the trend, to have autonomy, to do special things because we are, the birthplace of disability rights. And this often gets into ironic territory. Don't get me wrong. And we can poke holes in all of these emotional feelings around like why we are where we're at. But the truth of it is that we're coming around. It's slow moving. It's way slower than I would want it to be. But in the elementary school level, at least, we're on the right path to changing the way we think about how we educate kids. And so we still don't have everybody on board. We can't expect to have everybody on board. But I think that when we start our new curriculum next year, I think that we're going to be able to see through pockets of success and then replicating that success that we'll get most of our educators on board because the intent is in the right place, like pretty much everywhere, right? That we want our kids to learn, we want our kids to succeed. We do this not for the money, but because we care about kids and children and education and molding the future generations.
Well, I'm going to push on you a little bit. I'm going to push on you because we all want to do the right thing. We want kids to learn. And there is an ethos out there that says, it's not my fault, it's the kid's fault.
Yep.
And these are things I've heard. Structured literacy, which is, you got these 5 pillars plus oral language development, so call it 6, maybe add in writing, make it 7, right? But you've got these pillars, how kids learn to read, and they need that consistently every day. And you need curriculum that supports that, and et cetera. I've heard people say things like, and I quote, structured literacy is the patriarchy. Phonics is white supremacist.
Not only that, but assessment.
There'll be people listening from different parts of the country. There's some people who are like, what? What is that? Other people like you, Lindsay, like, yeah, I hear that all the time. Like, it's just normalized.
Yeah.
White supremacy. Now, listen, I'm not saying white supremacy doesn't exist. Sure. Phonics?
In this case,
phonics.
No. Yeah, no.
Phonics. We have gotten to a place in education where results and logic and reason are being pushed by these other agendas and mindsets and beliefs and philosophies. And I'm like, can we just get the kids to read? Can we just get the kids to read?
Well, because if you talk to many school districts, it's all about the adults. The customer is the teacher. If you talk to a superintendent, his customers oftentimes are the teachers. They forget that the kids are the customer. So it doesn't matter. And if you think about it, it's probably more fun to be in a cute classroom with a book nook where you're discovering reading together, and you're reading, and you have a whole week on the letter A, and you bring in apples and artichokes. But when kids do not learn how to read, you are failing at the first job that a school is supposed to do.
Well, I'll say second job. The first one is keep them safe.
Okay,
keep them safe.
Then 2.
No shootings. Keep them safe.
Yeah.
Teach them how to read. So I would say this, and I'm gonna turn it over to the guests in a second. But I gotta say this because this boils my blood. Mm-hmm. I mean, listen, I've come from a family of activists. Mm-hmm. You know, my mother is like, I call her Mom X sometimes. My mom is no joke. And my dad and his family are also very hardcore activists. But if anything is supremacist or exclusionary or racist or classist, it's the fact that you got all these kids who aren't being taught to read.
Yeah.
What happens to those kids in society when they can't read the letter?
Yeah.
What happens to them spiritually when they can't read the Bible everybody claims is so important? When they can't read the ballot everybody claims is so important? Mm-hmm. When they can't fill out the job application and get a job that everybody claims is so important? Like so if there is energy around kids being excluded systematically, it's a friend of mine, David Livin, and his wife Meredith, and he said, this is the apartheid. This is apartheid. And people are on one side of the wall versus on the other side of the wall. And there the two shall meet because of economics, expectations, access to resources, and consistent instruction. And my friend Risha Conroy with the
Dyslexia Alliance.
Yeah, Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children, she said that there are structured literacy deserts where children just don't have access.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
It's not the curriculum. The teachers haven't been trained. The principal doesn't know what in the world is going on. The school board is arguing about the finances, and the superintendent is about to quit in a year anyway. And so year in and year out, they don't have access. And if they do, it's not in tier 1. Mm-hmm. It's down the hall in some special classroom where the resource specialist who has been trained specially in this stuff gives them a little bit each day. But in regular classroom instruction, they're not getting it. So in terms of a civil rights issue, I would hope that people consider that and the implications of that as we look at, what kids have consistent access to.
And I think you've been very strong about saying that. Literacy.
People don't like it.
Yeah.
People don't like it. Kareem, now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. Sure. Or white supremacy or any, fine, sure. This is America. We've got our journey. And I'm not excusing anything. All I'm saying is the kids can't read, and that is one of the biggest offenses, civil rights offenses and violations that are out there.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, you guys. I'll be quiet.
It has been a deep shame in Berkeley for decades. The disparate outcomes between our students of color and other students.
Really?
We have one of the largest equity gaps in the country. It's around 57 points. So if you have 83% of white kids who are reading in the school system,
Lord have mercy.
We've got about 26% of Black kids reading in the school system.
So when you say there's been shame, but has anything happened to change that?
Well, this class action.
That is the problem. That is the core problem. Because right now, until this settlement, people in our community blamed outside factors, racism, it's poverty, it's anything but how we were teaching and what we were teaching. We didn't look at ineffective curriculum and ineffective intervention as part of this system of racism and inequity. And we have other data points. The Berkeley Unified School District has qualified for at least 5 years in a row for putting too many children of color, Black children, into special education when they didn't need to be. So we are on an educational plan from the state for that for about 5 years now in a row for over-identifying Black children. So there's many, many ways that we could point to our educational system as being implicit in this racism, in this inability to look at ourselves and say, hey, what we're doing isn't working, and it isn't working on many levels. And every teacher that I've spoken to personally has admitted that there were gaps in our curriculum and we needed something better to serve our children. But I never heard it from a leadership lens. You know, people were always saying it, you know, in secret as if it was a bad thing. And nobody was able or willing to say it publicly.
Is it at the school board level or the superintendent level? Who's the one driving? I mean, my experience with school boards are that it's kind of a volunteer job, but they don't really dig into the nitty gritty. So is it your superintendent at that level who's so steeped in this?
Brett, we don't want to get into this. This is a part
Listen, I'll be honest. I know the superintendent of Berkeley. She's a friend of mine. I get it. She's new. She just got there last year. That lawsuit came in under the last administration. I'm not making excuses for this. I'm just saying.
Two or three administrations ago.
Yeah. This is an ongoing problem. It's not just one administration.
Okay.
But it's at all levels of the system.
It's on all levels. Yeah. We've only had one school board member in the past 20 years who has won without teacher union endorsement.
So the teacher union.
Well, you can't just blame the teacher union, you know.
But I would say
they don't. So in Tennessee, isn't it? You don't have a teachers union in that district, right?
I can't speak on all districts, but not all districts do
so
have
there's
unions.
no teachers
some
union
do
there,
and some do not.
And the kids
some
graduating with honors and
top.
can't read. So it can't just. I'm not saying it's not a factor,
Okay.
but we quickly go to the union now. Listen. There's plenty you can throw darts at anybody in this situation. I'm not absolving anybody, right? But I'm saying we can't just go there. There is enough. So there are teachers who know this stuff doesn't work. And they whisper it in the teacher's lounge. We talk to it in the car, on the yard, and we say, this stuff doesn't teach kids to read. Or the principals who go in the principals meeting and say, you know what, this classroom over here or this curriculum right here, it's not working, or this teacher's not working. And we have to get to the point where we're not whispering in dark places.
Yes.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Somebody's got to tell the truth about what's going on with these kids. So that's why I'm so grateful for these lawsuits.
Yes.
I hate to say this, but maybe it takes that.
I think so, because you can take your kid in and you can talk about how devastating this has all been and how it's destroyed confidence. But when you bring in attorneys and you file a lawsuit,
now we talk,
and it's about money, it's a different conversation. And when you're able to say, in our district, we brought a systemic group complaint. And I'm very interested in these larger kind of class action or systemic group complaints where there's no NDA signed, everything is public. And what it does is it shows that your district, across the district and over time, is breaking federal law. That helps you be heard, and it helps change things for all the kids in the district from then on.
Well, you mentioned also, Niki, that the parents were able to get and afford some private support, tutoring, or whatever they did to help their kid learn a bit. But what if they didn't have those type of resources not everybody's in that situation where they either know what to do or have the money to do that type of thing.
It's expensive.
Can you speak that a little bit about in terms of resources and what parents need to have access to and the fairness of that? Does that play a role in this as you see it?
Oh, I definitely think it does, and in a couple of different ways. One that stands out to me is how it actually inflates district scores in certain places where there's higher economic status. Parents are more affluent; they can afford it. So because our higher income white families. Dyslexia doesn't, it's not colorblind. I mean, it is colorblind, excuse me. It's going to affect anybody, right? So they're out there going, okay, well, the school's not doing enough. But we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to mess with anything. We don't want to disturb anybody. We don't want to make a bad name for our family.
Right,
so we're going to go and pay for this. And they can, and that's wonderful. And then their student succeeds. And then the school gets to claim that on their testing. And that's wonderful. I mean, it obviously they're going to. I mean,
but it's masking something.
But that makes some inequities there, because then it actually makes it look like the schools who are our Title I schools, who have the lower socioeconomic status, who can't afford the extra support, they're teaching the same stuff. But man, those kids, there's something else going on there. That's why they're not getting it. There's that something else that you mentioned, Kareem. You know, there's all the others, right? The other things.
So that brings up, first of all, for parents, there's some shame, right? There's shame.
Again, the family's fault.
It's right, being blamed, and not just being blamed, but you have relationships with the school staff, and you're seen as a good parent or a nice parent. You're driving on field trips, and you're doing things to be part of the community. And so to complain is almost unseemly. And so even in the PTA meetings, no one wants to say, my child is struggling, because they think they're the other.
But I guarantee
I mean, I went through years where I volunteered in our schools, did all the PTA things, brought the teachers' appreciations, and I thought that would guarantee my kid a good education. And when that didn't work, I was devastated.
Yeah.
I thought that if I was just involved, if I was helpful, if I was nice, then my kid would get taught how to read. And it didn't happen.
Let's talk about this. Let's get into it. Okay. This being nice. There's a culture of nice. So there are expectations on kids, and there's expectations for parents.
Yeah.
So if Mama Carpenter was here from the Memphis Lift, she would talk about this all the way in Nashville Propel and those folks, which is there's a time to be nice, and there's a time when you have to stand on point for children.
Stand in the truth.
And you're going to lose some friends at the district level, at the school level, at the state level. There are parents of all ethnic groups who that's the last resort, is being in any way conflict with the powers that be. And they would rather go along to get along. When our kids are withering on the vine because no one is willing to stand up for them and voice things out and disrupt their comfort zone, disrupt their social group, their network, their peer group, their affiliations, or whatever, only as a last resort will they do it. In the meantime, the kids are getting further and further and further behind. Can you talk a little bit about the mindset and the fortitude that parents need to have in engaging the school and addressing these things? Do you understand where I'm coming from with this?
100%. Yeah. I work with students privately as a dyslexia therapist, but then I also provide consultation and advocacy support, because I didn't mean to go into that, but it kept coming up. It kept finding me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the students I worked with who those parents were saying, hey, at school, this is going on. Is this right? Should I say something? That was certainly happening with my direct clients. But then it was that mama went and told this mama, and that mama said, I need that lady's number because I have a question too. But yes, they're hesitant to want to bring it up. And you're exactly right, Kareem. Well, they don't want it. And just like what Lindsay said, I want them to treat my kid nicely. I want them to teach my student. I don't want them to, have any hard feelings. And we've got to throw that out the window. So yeah, the biggest things I can tell parents is follow your gut, be involved. You have to be involved. You have to know what's going on at school. And I know lives are busy. I know things can get busy, but these are the most crucial years right now when your child, especially elementary school, but those years that they are enrolled in school, you've got to know what's going on. You've got to have an ear to it. So as much as you can, know what is coming home, what's happening at school, have those questions. Don't miss those progress meetings. Have more progress meetings than they allow or that they offer out, right? If they say we only do really one progress, parent conference in the fall, ask for another one in the spring. And I also say put it in writing, even if you've spoken to mom at the car line, or at the bus stop, or spoken to teacher, at the car line, or at the bus stop. There was whatever it was. You talk to someone, go back and say, "Love talking to you today. Let's touch base again on these things. I can't wait to hear about the date for this meeting, or I'd love to hear that resource. Could you send that to this email?"
Right.
And it's so hard because it is another job. I just had an advocacy appointment with a parent last week, We've done so many great things for the student this year, but it's been a hard fight. And that mama feels so beat down as far as, have we done anything? And I had to highlight, look at all that you've done. Look at what wouldn't have happened if we hadn't have done this. I know it's been a lot. I know it's been time away from your husband, your family, your job, your hobbies, your friends. I know it takes time away from the other things that you would love to fill your life with, but this is your baby and this is the most important. So follow your gut, be aware, know all the things know as much as you can about what's going on, ask for those meetings. And it doesn't matter that there are 20, 30 kids in that classroom. It doesn't matter. Your kid is the most important for you at that moment. And that teacher can give you that most important moment with that student with you, I know a lot of people say that too. They're like, oh, well, they have so much on their plate. They have a really rough class this year. That doesn't matter. You are your child and you are one piece of that pie that they can give you that attention.
And if you don't fight for your kid, no one else will.
Right.
There's nobody else coming.
That's right.
You've got to do it. And this is the one chance that you have. And if you don't do it early, you're going to have a lot of trauma.
Oh, and so much regret.
Get in after it early.
I mean, we can speak with hindsight on that. We both have kids who are dyslexic.
Yes.
And they've gone through this system. And boy, the stories we could tell. The regrets, the reflections, saying, I wish we could have, I wish we should have, why didn't we? And kids remember things as well. Why didn't you? Where were you? How did you let this happen? Like that is something, and that tears on relationships, that tears on families.
Yes.
Marriages break up over stuff like this. And the emotional impact on children cannot be overstated.
Not an easy fix. Yeah. Trauma is created.
And I think you mentioned a really nice thing there, Kareem, that made me reflect on, so many parents stay in but what did I not do all of these other years? I can't believe I just found you and my daughter's in 6th grade. I say, don't worry about it. We're hitting the ground running.
That's right.
You cannot live in that. All that's going to do is drag things down now, right? Yep. We have to let that go. We have to say, you know what? When I know better, I do better. And let's make that turn and let's go forward.
There's real grief there. I got not to minimize it. Okay, go get therapy, go get help, go talk to somebody about this. And in between sessions, we need you to show up in the school and be a soldier for your kid. Right? Go get help. Go fine. Yes, wrestle with that. And we need you right now because you're the only help coming for this child. It's on
Kareem,
you.
I just said to my husband, last month, I said, man, sometimes I feel like I'm their therapist. And I'm talking about the parents, not the student, but the parents, because you're right. It affects the whole family. Any type of suffering that they go through, you are going to obviously feel that, but it's going to bleed into so many things. So yeah, you're right. Some therapy is not a bad idea for anyone in this position.
Absolutely.
I would say get your therapy later. Focus your efforts first on getting your kid what they need and spend the money on all that they need, then get your therapy.
Okay,
that's
fair
later.
enough, Brett. I hear you, Brett.
That's later.
Okay, fair enough. So we have legal cases now where the courts have said literacy is important and children have rights that have to be attended to by having an appropriate education. And you can't accommodate your way out of that. They've got to move towards some progress on these key things. And so I'm wondering if I am a community activist or a parent or whomever or a district official, I'm wondering what are the implications of this for my system, for my child, for my community, for the colleges of education. I wonder what some of the implications are for this potentially.
So I actually want to go back a little bit and address some commonality between the cases in Tennessee and in Berkeley, because both of these cases were brought by families of teenagers, brought by families who had tried so hard to get what their kids needed and had come up against such systemic brick walls that they felt their only recourse was these lawsuits.
Yeah.
And what we can do as advocates is to use these types of cases to further along that progress, because they have given us all a gift.
Tool.
They have given us a path forward to helping really put the rubber where it meets the road and prove that if we wanted to, we could bring a similar lawsuit in many areas of the country. Mm-hmm. And so they should do the right thing now and avoid that expense and that public shaming of these national headlines that are showing that they aren't doing right by the children in their community. And so in Berkeley, one thing that we really appreciated is that there are reports, regular reports on how they are doing with the settlement and how they are accomplishing things. And we read through these dense reports every single time they come out. And we report back to the board, well, we agree with this part. Good job. But I am going to point out 3 or 4 things in the 2 minutes I have public comment on things that aren't quite accurate, or you could do better on, or you need to concentrate on next. And that has been invaluable, along with state law, ed code. So Niki's talking about asking for another teacher conference. Well, in California, you have a right to see the curriculum that's being used for your child and have it explained to you. In California, you have a right to come along to your kids' classroom and check out the instruction in person. They might want you to schedule it. They might give you a babysitter, but you have a right to go and see that stuff. If parents know about the educational rights they already have without legislation, then that is powerful. And we can bring up a whole new crop of activists, just like the parents who brought our settlement in Berkeley. They're outie, they did their job. They gave us a gift. It's now our job to take it and run with it. And when my kids graduate from Berkeley schools, I hope that there's another crop of activists who come and build upon the work that we've done in our community to make things better, because we're not in it for our own kids. We're in it for all the kids who are coming up behind our own.
Well said.
That does make it difficult, though, because we had a similar issue. We flipped our district to the science of reading, very, very active. But then things come up. Your kid's okay. You kind of move on to other things. It's become like an addiction for me. So I'm not going anywhere because I'm going to have grandkids. And usually I'm the oldest one with any history in these meetings. But you have to continue to cultivate young leaders behind you, because I still think unless we have parents educated and activated, this is not going to fully swing and stay with the science of reading. Goes back and forth. Parents are the one who have to cement this as this is what will be what everyone's going to do from here on out. Just keep up with the science. Continuously improve with the research.
When you hear about lawsuits, we oftentimes go to the most drastic aspects of things. But what about regular classroom instruction? The student's learning doesn't start in a special ed room or with a resource teacher. It starts in regular classroom instruction, what they call Tier 1. So it's the materials, it's the teaching, the pedagogy, how they're doing it. So I'm curious, is there focus on Tier 1 and the regular classroom instruction? In other words, if I'm a superintendent or a board president, am I thinking I just have to make sure my special ed department's got their act together, and then I won't be sued. We won't face lawsuits if our sped teachers have their act together. I'm not so sure I hope that's not the message that they're taking away from this. Right? Can you talk about what students have a right to in regular classroom instruction? Not pull out, not down the hall, but in Tier 1 regular classroom instruction. What's the need or the demand there so that they can get a free and appropriate public education?
Yeah, in Tennessee, I will say we, Lindsay and I spoke before the podcast just to kind of introduce ourselves to each other, and we found that Tennessee seems to be a little ahead of California in some of the literacy legislation. As far back as 2019, the summer of 2019, they began to implement an excellent training for professional learning opportunity for all kindergarten, first, second, and third grade teachers on the foundational reading skills. So it was a two-part approach. Everyone had to attend the initial approach, which was an online course that really got into the science of reading. It was really, really wonderful. wonderful, actually. And then the second part that you could choose to attend was a week long in person with a trainer. And I was actually one of the trainers. Very blessed to be able to participate in that. And it was phenomenal. I was going into places in Tennessee that I'd heard of, never visited, meeting teachers who had been teaching for 30 years and had never heard of the science of reading, had never heard of, explicit, systematic, direct instruction, structured literacy, oral language development, so that's wonderful. We are on a great path with that. That has continued. It's, I don't want to misspeak and tell you the time frame that all of those teachers needed to, get this little certification on their license, but it's a requirement. They've had several years to finish that up. I will say, I worry that we stopped at that third grade level. I do think it needs to be something that, our middle school and our secondary teachers need to know. When a secondary teacher, back to the William versus Montgomery County case in Tennessee, one of the special education teachers who taught William actually was on the stand, and they had email evidence that she had said, this student is not learning to read. There were teachers who knew something was not correct. And, he stayed below the 10th percentile, which means 90% of his peers were scoring better than him, across the board from middle school through high school. So, obviously something was there. So my point being, I think she knew something was up, but like I said earlier, I don't think she had the tool bag to dig into to know what to do. So we are on a good path. We've got some things in place, but as Lindsay mentioned earlier, the trickle down effect, it takes years. And I hate that about educational legislation and things like that. I do. I understand that, it does have to take some time, but man, I wish we could say you have to do it now or you're done. I want some ultimatums out there, but I know that's probably me just wishful thinking. So we do have some good things in place. There's some legislation proposed that has not passed yet, to my knowledge, but that the report card will have to not just give a letter grade, but will have to give a reading proficiency score as far as, Lindsay mentioned Dibbles. We have Ames Web used a lot out here, Dibbles, some Fastbridge. But anyways, one of our universal screeners, that their scores have to be on that report card with it. Wouldn't that be amazing to see A on your report card, but also 10th percentile on our universal screener? Right. That's not connecting. Right. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Kareem, but we do have some good things in place. We are going in the right direction. There's definitely legislation surrounding, we will not have 3 queuing curriculums in the state of Tennessee, but that doesn't mean that everyone came and the police came and took them away from these schools. Right. So you know what that means. Right. There might be some people who are shutting that door. Yeah. That's where and they're still teaching those 3 queuing. Yeah. So we're on a good track. I just wish it could happen a lot quicker for these students, because it's the students who are in right now. That's the crucial ones who are not going to benefit from this wonderful legislation that's hopefully coming.
Doesn't that bring up for you, Kareem and Brett, like the idea of the complicity of curriculum developers in creating and selling all these ineffective products, especially at the intervention level? Things where they're saying that they're trying, right? They're using something, but it has the kids aren't progressing, and they're certainly not progressing fast enough. It's one thing that we've been really struggling with in Berkeley in California, but something that just like really gets my goat.
Well, the thing that is so horrifying to me is to realize when you do this work as a parent, I'm not an educator. I have no relation to the education department except that I have children in it. But to see all of the people who make money on the backs of my child. So, and I love teachers. When they are properly trained, they're amazing. But teachers, administrators, legislators, people who make curriculum, professors, and at the end of the day, they go home because they've gone to work, and then they shut it off and they do their own thing. But when you have a child with dyslexia or you are dyslexic, it is all day, every day for the rest of your life. And that's why the parents need to have a voice. And that's why parents are such strong advocates who are willing to put in the time to get the legislation, even if it takes 2, 5, 10 years. We're here. We're not going anywhere. And we're going to make sure this happens.
You know, Brett, we were speaking earlier about how you show up to meetings, let's say an IEP meeting, and the language that you can use to get people's attention so they know that you're not playing. Whether it's I'm just going to record this, or so you gave some examples. You might could speak that a little bit. But parents, you got to fight to win.
Yeah, take no prisoners. So basically, I like to coach parents to just pepper their language with legalese. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, child find. A district has an affirmative obligation to find a child with dyslexia. If you've gone outside through a neuropsych or wherever and gotten your kid diagnosed, your district's already broken federal law. FAPE, a fair and appropriate public education. What Kareem's talking about is I had this extraordinary advocate named Brenda Lewison, and she's gone, and we miss her every day. But she would set her phone down on the table, begin recording, and ask the district, say, we're just trying to keep, good records, make sure that, somebody who can't be here has a record of the meeting, but we're going to record that. Is that okay? And the tape's already on. So the district is thinking, well, okay, yeah, we'll tape it. But everything they're saying, they're much more careful because it's being recorded and it can be given to an attorney. So when it comes to your kid standing in the truth, it is scary. But if you won't do it for your own kid, nobody else will.
So for Reading for Berkeley, one thing that we did early on is we created a booklet called Actions for Reading Success. And we do a step-by-step process of kind of teaching parents the special words and the special questions they can ask and defining all that edubabble and eduspeak that sometimes IEP teams use to kind of other certain parties or confuse people because there's so many acronyms and special definitions of words. And unless you know what language they're speaking, it creates another barrier for advocacy for your own children.
We will link to that in the show notes.
So we're wrapping up. I just have a question for each of you. For Niki, what steps can schools and districts take to ensure that students who are identified with learning disabilities receive the appropriate support and individualized goals?
Well, okay, that's a big question.
Well, that's why we got you here.
Oh, yeah. So I think your first step is to immerse yourself. Brett, you were, and Lindsay, you kind of talked about some superintendent things earlier. I think our superintendents need to be, honestly, almost some experts at our science of reading. They need to know the research. They need to know the evidence-backed, research out there. A little bit about what was mentioned a minute ago. We've got publishers out there who they'll slap that word evidence-based or research-based. They'll slap dyslexia-specific on things. And someone who hasn't done their due diligence, their due research, or have people on their team that digs into that for them, might go, oh, that sounds like a great program for all of our kids. It matches what the law says. Let's go. And unfortunately, it's not. So you've got to assemble a great team of leaders under you at that district level who truly all believe in the science of reading. And that's going to be your district special education coordinator. Those are going to change, that verbiage title will change district to district usually, but something along that lines, your literacy coordinator, your elementary, your secondary, those coordinators, the people who are in charge of that curriculum and that development at all those levels need to be well-versed. That's only going to trickle down into your high expectations of your educators, right? And again, it doesn't need to just be your special education teachers who hold the knowledge in that building, right? And if they do, what a wonderful resource to then be a great peer and a great coach to the rest of your educators who are teaching tier 1 reading, right? I want in elementary schools, I want my PE teacher, I want my music teacher, I want my librarian, I want everyone knowing about the science of reading and what the expectations are. And I'll plug myself a little bit. I'm a certified academic language therapist. That we are, kind of highly regarded as, an expert in structured literacy intervention, specifically dyslexia therapy. I'm going to be real. My ideal world would have at least one of us per school. We would have an academic language therapist per school. What that's going to do is it's going to give someone that knowledge base to coach and teach others, but it's also going to give the most expert interventionist for those students who need the most intervention. We didn't mention it today, but dyslexia is a spectrum disorder. So you're going to have students who are more mildly impacted, might just need some accommodations, maybe a 504 plan. Moderately impacted might need some school intervention in tier 2, tier 3. And then your most severely impacted will also have a specific learning disability in word reading and in written expression. They'll have some compounding additional things, and they'll need special education services. We're missing a lot of those mild to moderate impact students as well, right? We are finding some disservice for our students who qualify for special education, but we're missing those other ones. So we need more knowledge about the wide variety of what dyslexia can look like in students and how we approach intervention for all of those students. And then on top of that, coming back to the case out of Tennessee, we've got to have educators who understand how to identify deficit areas around literacy skills, and then where to intervene, what to pull from. That toolbox has to be full, because my students that I see, I'm not doing the same exact things with every student. They need different things. But yes, I'm working around a dyslexia therapy, structured literacy intervention, lesson, but it's going to look a little different for each kid. So we've got to have more knowledge, and us as, or if I'm an administrator, I've got to recognize when a teacher says, hey, something's not going right here. I need more. We've got to know where to go to give them more. Mm-hmm. So I think that answers your question.
I think so. I mean, they just don't, oftentimes, their systems just aren't sure what to do. Mm-hmm. Schools aren't sure what to do. Teachers definitely aren't sure what to do. And so there just has to be clarity. You have to choose curriculum that's going to meet the needs of the greatest number of kids possible. You have to have time to plan, to prepare those lessons so that you can differentiate instruction and scaffold it appropriately and meet children's needs and give good feedback. You have to have effective leadership that understands the science of reading, as you were saying, and so that they can grow teachers. Mm-hmm. Grow their practice. You have to have, schedule has to be right, your calendar has to be right, your budget has to be right. There are a litany of things that have to be right. And at the end of the day, the parents have to be willing to hold folks accountable and be well informed about what's going on.
And I think, I have a background as being in a public school, as an educator for more than a decade. And I feel really strongly that we talked about parents who are hesitant to bring things up. I think we've got teachers who are hesitant to bring things up too. I think there's times where we have teachers who are like, oh, I don't like what this is doing. This isn't producing what I want, but the powers that be are telling me I've got to use it. I'm not saying it's equal by any means, but I do think you're going to have some of those. So we've got to empower these educators. And I love that there's podcasts out there. You guys, there's, when I got the email to approaching about being on this podcast, I was like, oh, I know who Kareem is. Like that's a name I know. He's been on a lot of podcasts I listen to. So I'm all about, on social media, I'm always trying to share different podcast episodes that are just so impactful, because what a wonderful free opportunity for our educators to go, wait, I just listened to this on my way to work this morning. This sounds like a kid that I've been struggling with my classroom and my curriculum's not fitting them. And maybe it gives them that access point to go talk to administration. Maybe it gives them an access point to, go pick up a book that helps learn a bit more about this structured literacy that they're hearing about. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out too, that I do think there are some teachers who are out there going, man, this isn't working. And I don't want to rock the boat because I need a job. I need medical. I need, I got to take care of things.
Yeah.
Well, and Sold a Story is perfect for that. I give that out like it's candy all day, every day, week after week. It's good for parents, good for educators, legislators, everybody.
Part of the reason why we asked you two to come on is because of the power of precedent legally. So these cases in different regions across the country, we're talking about federal court, not state court. So what can be gleaned from these from Hawaii to New York? And it's important that people understand their rights are being clarified by the courts to make sure that you have a leg to stand on and that everyone kind of knows what the rules of the game are. And they're saying, hey, you have the right to have an appropriate education. The goals alone are not enough.
Progress.
And they have to make progress, right, towards certain goals that are, or certain things that will help you in life. That is huge. And so it's important to then have the language that Brett was talking about. So when you say things, people know that you mean business and that you're serious and that you can't just be brushed aside. So that's one of the reasons why we really wanted to have you all on today, is to give people a better understanding of what some of these cases are about and the implications of it. But Lindsay, I have one more question for you, which is, how do you go about winning hearts and minds of educators when the mindset of many is about compliance? How do you move people from compliance to actually being advocates in their practice, advocates in their policies, advocates in their preparation, advocates in their daily instruction? How do you shift and win hearts and minds so they can actually do the work they have to do?
Wow, you're not going easy on either of us,
You're
are
getting
you?
tough.
Hey, that's hey.
So I think the answer probably isn't going to satisfy you or a lot of people. So I'm readying myself for your pushback again. But I think that it's a slower process than many parents and families with struggling readers want, because number one, bravery of leadership. Leadership has to put a plan in place in order to fix the gaps in their current system. So that means an audit of what's happening in their system, and then a plan to fix what's going on. And that needs to happen in a way that you can show incremental success. So, for example, you could implement a screening system, and that's more evidence-based, like DIBELS versus a running records from F&P. And then you show your teaching staff that this is catching a lot more kids early on with more accuracy and is quicker and easier to do, right? Mm-hmm. And then once you have that, you're like, here are your tools, right? Here's your process for identification. And here are some tools that actually work. So you're replacing LOI, for example, with some kind of OG methodology. And so through amplifying success and making sure that you're spotlighting these teachers and these places in your early adopters, right? Because you're going to have some people who are slower to change their hearts and minds, and you're going to have some people who are ready to change their hearts and minds. So find those people who are ready. Who are your people that have already been listening to these podcasts, who are already trying these little adjustments within the bounds of the resources that they have, and amplify their voices, their successes, so that others in the same system get really excited to try those new methodologies too. So that's my recommendation for changing hearts and minds. Unfortunately, it's not a magic wand. And you can see that this kind of process takes a few years to really demonstrate across like a community that these new methodology can really work.
I think there's huge opportunity, though, with dyslexic families because they have federal law to leverage. So you leverage that. Once you get in good interventions for those children, what happens is those kids go out and they get their intervention, and then they go back in the classroom. And the classroom teacher says, "What are you doing? These kids are beginning to learn to read." In our district, the regular ed teachers did that same thing. They asked what was going on, and that's how we got Wilson Foundations in every single classroom. If you can get good instruction, it's a way in to the broader district and Tier 1.
Well, we're going to actually talk to some folks and see how what they think about your suggestions, about starting with a small group and then growing it out. We're going to have a podcast episode with the Mississippi Department of Education, some leaders there, some leaders in the Delaware district, and in Oakland, a previous administration where they really made a lot of progress, and to lift up some of these ideas and make sure people have some concrete things they can do. But I hear you. You may have to start with a coalition of the willing and then go from there is what I hear you saying. Listen, I want to...
Or even just expect that only the willing are going to implement it, and then you're going to have to lift that up for the other people.
Support those teachers, lift them up.
In our case for Berkeley, the settlement is a public document that provides a plan for any district to follow, which starts with auditing, then screening, building up a system of support, like what are you going to do next if something goes wrong, if you have a red flag, training teachers, implementing better instruction, measuring that, and finally putting real goals on achievement. So that whole outline is there for anybody to look up and to replicate. I'm not saying it's easy, but it has shown that we can do it, even in a place like Berkeley, where we are so against the patriarchy, it hurts.
We can do it, and the kids have a civil right to demand that we do it. And the only push I'd give is that our kids don't have time to waste. They really don't. Because as we're going through these processes and slow rolling in and finding a small group and all that, kids tap out. Sometimes they have different amounts of perseverance based on their lives or personalities, et cetera. And the clock is ticking. And you just don't know when a kid, like my daughter said, she's dyslexic, and she told me, it's like, Dad, there's more than one way to drop out of school. So the kids can be in class and still mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, they may have already checked out. Yeah. But they're there and they count for attendance and all the rest. But so the clock is ticking on our kids. And I would just urge everyone as they listen to these podcasts and hear from our guests and our experts to make sure that they keep the kids' clock in mind.
Yes.
They need us to do this now. They need it yesterday, as a matter of fact.
We call the podcast Literacy Now because we don't want it tomorrow. But I should have called it Literacy Yesterday.
Listen, Fulcrum, its original name was Full and Complete Literacy Now. But my co-founder,
like, what is that?
She said FCLN, Kareem, Fucklin isn't. We're not going to do Fucklin. FCLN.
Can we say this on here?
Oh, this is the acronym. She's like, Fucklin, that's not. We can't. She's like, just trust me on this.
No.
We're gonna do something. Just trust me. I was like, but we need it now. She's like, I know, friend, but we're gonna. And so she came up with Fulcrum, which is full and complete reading as a universal mandate. It's a good compromise, but the point is, we need it now.
Yes,
we need it now. So I appreciate both of you. For your expertise, your insights, the information that you provided, and again, the different resources, both to your organization, Niki, and also your work, Lindsay, in the Bay Area of California. We'd love to put it in the show notes and any other resources that you think would be edifying for our listeners. But we just appreciate you both.
Absolutely.
Sister Nofelt and Sidler Richardson. We appreciate you both. Thank you so much, and until we meet again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Literacy Now is a podcast designed specifically for parents in our effort to ensure every child learns to read. Parents deserve a seat at the table, and we bring their voices to the fore. We invite you to join the Parents for Reading Justice community on all of our socials, and make sure to visit our website to watch our documentary and to take our masterclass. All of our content is free of charge because every child deserves to learn to read. This episode was brought to you by parentsforreadingjustice.org, produced by Brett Tingley and Keita Mascaro.